Hello, and on behalf of the Global Independent VMUG organization, I would like to welcome you to today's webcast, Changed Block Tracking and Data Recovery, What You Need to Know, presented by David LeClaire, VP of Product Marketing of Unitrends. Before we get started, I would like to thank you for participating in today's webcast and for your continued participation in the VMUG program. Just as a reminder, VMUG offers a number of benefits to our members, including complimentary local VMUG meetings and full-day conferences taking place around the world, our monthly e-newsletter, VMUG Voice, access to the VMUG website at www.vmug.com, educational webcasts like these, and the ability to subscribe to VMUG Advantage, a benefits package only available to VMUG members that provides discounts on training, exams, licenses, eval experience, and VMworld. Make sure to take advantage of everything VMUG has to offer. Moving on, I have 3 quick housekeeping items. First, we are recording today's session and will make the recording available for on demand. You can expect to receive a follow-up email directing you to the recording, and you can find the slide deck from today's presentation in the resource widget. Second, we will be holding a Q&A session throughout the presentation. All questions will need to be entered into the Q&A widget window to ensure speakers receive and see them. They will be addressed one by one accordingly. Third, there will be a short online evaluation that pops up when you leave the webcast. Please be sure to take time to let us know what you thought of today's session and what you would like to see going forward. And with that, I would like to turn the floor over to David. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chelsea. Happy to be here today to talk about changed block tracking. So quickly, just want to outline a quick agenda of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to do a brief outline of what we mean by changed block tracking, just to catch up anyone who may not be familiar with it. And then we're going to talk about some recent issues around CBT that have popped up that have caused some concerns about backup of VMs in the most recent versions of VMware. And lastly, we're going to talk about recovery assurance technology as a potential solution in ways that you can actually bring some confidence back into your environment and make sure that you don't get bit by these sorts of things in the future. So let's start first for those of you that may not be familiar with changed block tracking. Most of you probably are, but just in case you're not, it is a feature of vSphere that keeps track of the blocks of a virtual disk that have changed since a specific point of time. And this is a really important feature for most backup applications because we use it to more efficiently back up. CBT allows us to only back up the blocks that have changed rather than backing up every block in a disk. As a result, it allows us to improve the backup efficiency, improve backup times, and really allows you as an end user to back up way more data than you normally would have been able to without it, more frequently, so you can lower your recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives. It's really one of the great features that it's the type of thing that has made VMware such a leader in this space. Other hypervisors that don't have this capability, it's really painful to do those sorts of things. You have to kind of jump through hoops as a backup provider. And it's a really great capability that they've provided for the past several iterations of vSphere. However, as we look at the past 18 months or so, there have been a number of recent CBT issues that have come up. And VMware has put out a number of knowledge base articles related to these. Many of these issues can result in an absolute worst case for IT. It can result in what we sometimes call silent corruption. So not only do you have corrupted data in your backup due to some of these issues, but you may not even be aware of it until you actually need to do a recovery. And that's really kind of a worst case scenario because you think you're fine, you think you're protected, you're doing everything properly, backing up your environment, setting up your DR environment. But when you actually go at that moment of recovery, usually at the worst possible time on a weekend or in the middle of the night, you suddenly realize that your backup isn't what you thought it was, and your restore doesn't work properly. CBT is one of those advanced software features that there's a lot going on with it with regards to the storage underpinnings of the hypervisor. So it's a good thing to kind of keep in mind and keep an eye on CBT, especially with releases like Release 6 that just came out that had a lot of new storage functionality in them. So let's look at a couple of the recent KB articles that have come out. Right before 6.0 launched, there was this knowledge-based article, 2090-639, that came out in late 2014. And this describes a scenario where one of the critical APIs, this query change disk areas API, was returning incorrect sectors after you had extended a virtual machine VMDK file with change block tracking enabled. So if you had actually, with change block tracking turned on, enabled that file to go past 128 gigabyte boundary, what would happen was your change block tracking would become unreliable. And due to the faulty information that was coming back, some of the change blocks might not be captured by your backup. So consequently, your restore operation would potentially not restore all the data because you're essentially using an incomplete backup that could result in data loss. Now, this affected both ESXi 4.x and 5.x. And it is one of those things that potentially could result in that kind of silent corruption. Now, fortunately for Unitrends, when this one came out, we were resilient to this issue. We were not affected by it. Our design has come to realize that getting accurate change block tracking information is really critical. So as a result, we do everything we possibly can to make sure that our backup appliances, whether it's our UEB, Unitrends Enterprise Backup Software appliance, or our physical appliances, Recovery Series appliances, we do everything we can to make sure that the CBT information is always accurate. So if a disk happens to expand in the middle of an incremental change, we detect that expansion and we promote that backup from an incremental backup into a full backup. Thereby, by doing that, we automatically reset the CBT appropriately, and we make sure we always get the right information back. So in this particular knowledge base, in our case, for Unitrends products, we were not affected by it. But it was still one of those things where a lot of people got nervous and wondered what was going on. Ultimately, VMware has issued a patch for this particular bug for 5.x, but they have not yet released a patch for this on 4.x. So let's talk about another one that's a little bit more recent. After 6.0 came out, the first issue that came up was this issue that was put out in this knowledge base 211-4076, which alerted us to the fact that there was a potential area with change block tracking enabled where when you were backing up a virtual machine, that backup could fail. So if you were, this affected ESXi 6.0. The symptoms were that you'd actually have a failure in the backup. So when you're actually backing up that VM, it would fail after the upgrade. So your VM would fail after upgrading or installing to 6.0. Sometimes powering on virtual machines or expanding the size of the virtual disk would fail. Sometimes taking VM quiesced snapshots would fail. And this was a result due to systems that actually had a large number of virtual disks that reached an upper threshold, or systems that actually had multiple VMs with CBT turned on. They would fail because there was a heap exhaustion. VMware did come out with a patch on this fairly shortly thereafter. But around the same time, there was a second issue related to CBT that was also announced. This one, 2.1, was KB 213-6854. And this one got a lot of attention, particularly here at Unitrends, because this was one that could result in, again, that silent corruption where you think your backups are working properly and kind of find out because of an error in the CBT information, you may not actually be getting all your backup. So in this case, the API was, again, returning incorrect change sectors. So as a result of that, you wind up with inconsistent virtual machine backups, and you could potentially have corrupted backups without even realizing it. VMware also issued a patch on this, which I've listed here, but it really led to a lot of buzz in the space about what's really going on with CBT. Is this something that we should be worried about? And the answer is probably no. The fact of the matter is that all software tends to have issues. The question is, well, what do we do to kind of minimize the impact, and how do we actually make sure that regardless of what's going on with the underlying hypervisor, how do I know that my backups are always in good shape? So that's the next thing we wanted to talk about here. So when we look at what VMware recommended as a solution for this, these were all really good recommendations. Unitrends actually had an additional recommendation as well. But ideally, what you should do is upgrade to the latest patch, obviously, that addresses these issues. Alternatively, if you're not able to upgrade to the latest patch, what VMware suggested was one of three things. You could either downgrade the affected hosts to version 5.5. You could shut off the virtual machines before doing any incremental backup. Or you could always do a full virtual machine backup rather than an incremental backup. None of those are what I would consider kind of an ideal situation. There's a lot of reasons why we want to do incremental backups. It does kind of consolidate the amount of information we have to back up. It saves on storage costs. It reduces our backup windows to allow us to back up more frequently, which gets us better protection. Unitrends actually had another alternative. Because we support both host-based backup as well as guest-level backups, we can protect a VM but with an agent, and that agent actually does not use these APIs. So as an alternative, if you're not able to get to the latest patch that VMware has put out, if you're using Unitrends, you could deploy an agent into those VMs. There are some trade-offs, obviously, between guest level and host level protection. And in Unitrends' case, we actually have the ability to support both. Matter of fact, it's something we call deep virtualization. We think it's a really great way of actually using host level protection to back up the majority of your VMs using basic snapshots of those VMs without having to use any agents. But the reason why we do use agents and we do allow it is agents actually do allow us to get more insight into what's going on with the actual guest operating system or application, and allows us to do more incremental backups, allows us to do more granular recovery of objects in an application, as well as giving us some other benefits as well. So because we have that capability, that is an option to support as a workaround in this case as well. I would recommend, if you want a lot more information about what's going on with these things, we wrote a knowledge base article ourselves in our own support area. If you go to Unitrend's website and you search for KB 3765, it'll provide additional instructions on what you actually have to do to install these patches, get your system back online. We also provide some tools that can actually help. One of the things that you have to do in almost all these cases is reset the CBT. And resetting the CBT can be an arduous task. Kind of requires you to power off the VM and edit the VM TTK-enabled property using the vSphere client or using the VMware APIs to kind of enable and disable. So we've actually created some scripts that would automatically do all these steps for you and make this change a little bit easier. So you can get those scripts as well from our website. But one of the things that I did want to spend some time on today was specifically talking about recovery assurance technology. And the reason why we think recovery assurance technology is no longer just a nice-to-have feature, it really should be something that all enterprises are looking at as something that is required, is because it can do an awful lot to bring complete confidence into your environment. It allows us to automate some of the testing and validation of our backups on a regular basis. So we wanted to basically spend some time talking about that. Recovery assurance is not something that is solely a Unitrend's technology area. It's something that Gartner is actually tracking. What I'm showing right now is the Gartner hype cycle for IT service continuity management for this year. And you can see recovery assurance is something that is quickly moving up the hype cycle. It's something that Gartner's tracking closely because they also believe that this is an emerging technology that can help IT do more and have more confidence in their environment than what has been previously been possible. So recovery assurance is baked into the Unitrend's portfolio. For those of you who are familiar with Unitrends, this slide should be pretty familiar. For those of you who are not, this is kind of describing the high level of Unitrend's portfolio. We have both recovery series physical appliances. These are a hardware solution that's a PBBA that ranges in size from 1 terabyte up to about 182 terabytes of storage. But we also have a software product called Unitrends Enterprise Backup, which is an all-in-one backup software solution that deploys as a virtual machine into VMware or Hyper-V if you're a Microsoft customer. But those are really the basis for our data protection. And from there, we have the ability to add in cloud storage for backup copies, use the Unitrends cloud for DRAS, as well as augment with our optional Reliable DR product. Reliable DR is our recovery assurance product that works with VMware, Hyper-V. It also works with physical Windows systems as well. So when we talk about recovery assurance with Reliable DR, what we're talking about is something that is able to automate the testing of your backup and disaster recovery environment in order to provide you with 100% confidence that your tools and your environment is working exactly as you'd expect it, and that your recovery is going to be guaranteed. And the way it works is we automate a lot of the validation tasks using Reliable DR and recovery assurance technology. We automate the spin up of essentially a test environment where we can validate our backups. We can validate at the application level that your application, whether it's a simple application in a single VM or an n-tier application that is spread across multiple VMs, we can validate that that application's operating properly. We can make API calls into it to make sure that it's producing the results we expect, and we can validate that that recovery occurred within whatever objectives you defined are critical. So if you have a 15-minute RTO or RPO or a 2-hour window, we will validate that your application is recovering within that time in actuality. This is not something where we're estimating it. We're actually validating that your objectives are being met in real time. And we can do this in an automated fashion. So as a result of that, it kind of ends the DR testing hell that a lot of companies that only do DR testing or only validate backups when they have to. You know, they do it once every 6 months, they do it once a year, or perhaps never at all. You can automate this to run as often as you like. You can have it so that it runs once a day or every couple hours, depending on what you actually need. As a result of this, you get increased confidence with recovery assurance in your ability to recover with automated proof. That proof is delivered directly into your inbox via a report that is automatically generated that has gone through and validated all of your backups, all of your critical applications, that they are in a recoverable state, and we've certified it. So the way this actually looks to you, this is one of the views you would get. This is essentially a RPO and RTO compliance report, one of many different reports that we can do. And the key is, as I said, we're testing and validating that your applications are actually meeting their RPO. So in this case, we have 4 applications with an RPO of 1 day. We've actually tested and validated that one's coming back in a little over 18 minutes, one's coming back in 9 minutes and 42 seconds, et cetera, et cetera. And we're validating both RPO and RTO in actuality and proving to you that you're exactly as you would expect it to be. If there was an outage of this, if for some reason your application or your backup did not recover properly, this report would automatically show you that things did not work as expected and allow you to basically take action immediately. So in the case of some of these CBT issues, as soon as that bug was introduced and you actually had backups that were incomplete and not recovering properly, this would show up instantly in these reports. So at this point, you're covered. You're covered for not only these CBT type issues that come up, but any other type of issue that would potentially affect your recoverability. So what else can we do with recovery assurance technology? We can test a lot of different things because essentially what we're doing is we're spinning up your VMs in a sandbox environment that allows us to do different things on it. So by spinning up one or multiple virtual machines using our instant recovery functionality, we can do things like validate that whether it's a Windows or a Linux VM, we can perform database checks. We can check that the application services were properly started. We can perform network tests to other dependent VMs within the sandbox. We can even run custom scripts that validate that any other information that's not available out of the box that is specific to your application, you can customize this so that that's tested as well. Because this runs in a sandbox environment, it's completely isolated from your production environment. There's no impact whatsoever on your runtime environment. Typically, reliable DR jobs execute against the latest available backup. However, we can also use what we call failover to CRP or a certified recovery point to manually run tests against older backups as well. So every time that we validate that your recovery environment is working properly, we create what we call that CRP, that certified recovery point. We basically guarantee that setup, as it sits in that particular configuration, is certified to always recover. And we save those, so you can actually to validate against not only the most recent, but the ones in the past as well. So recovery assurance is available today throughout our portfolio. If you have a recovery series physical appliance, it's available as an add-on to recovery series. If you're a Unitrends Enterprise Backup software customer, our latest UEB bundles include reliable DR in the highest end bundle that we call Unitrends Enterprise Backup Enterprise Plus Edition. Enterprise Plus basically allows you to have reliable DR on any VM that is being protected by that UEB license. If you're also running Unitrends Cloud and you're actually pushing backup copies of your data to the Unitrends Cloud and using Unitrends DRAS to restore critical VMs, we also have the ability to run recovery assurance as a service on that DRAS environment as well. So whether you are interested in validating your environment on-premise or in the cloud, our recovery assurance solutions are able to do that. We do have trials that are available. You can go to our website and download it today. So the last thing I'm going to do before I wrap up this portion and turn this over to the Q&A portion is, if any of this interests you, we have a very interesting offer going on right now. We are so confident that you will be pleased with what we have to offer. We actually have something that we call the $50 for 15 minutes. So if you go to our website and select this offer, if you're willing to talk with us for 15 minutes, we're willing to give you $50 for that conversation. We're very confident that our solutions are leading in the industry, and we'd love to have the chance to talk with you about them further. So with that, I think I'm going to pause for just a second. We're going to turn over and bring up some of the Q&A. So if you just give me 1 second to go over to there and see if I'm up. So one question was, is there a downside to using guest level protection versus? Cause I said that was a possibility to work around some of the CBT issues. I'd say there's advantages to using a guest. As I said, it allows us to do more incremental and granular backup and control. The downside of using agents is, of course, you have to manage the agents within the VM. So that is the beauty of actually being able to support host-based backup and agentless backup using the APIs that VMware provides. It's certainly an easier management solution. But the wonderful thing about the Unitrends solution is that we have the flexibility to do both. Some of our competitors really go with one or the other. They either use agents exclusively or they do agentless exclusively. We think it's important to actually have the option of doing both because the other advantage of using an agent is on particularly large VMs, because we can get more granular and we can actually shrink the amount of data that we're backing up, which can actually have a pretty profound impact on the performance of your virtualized environment as well. And we've seen, particularly with like large email deployments and VMs that have this huge mailboxes, that it's the difference between having a backup process that doesn't interfere with the production environment and a solution that does interfere. So there's a question here. Do we have an agent for AIX? Unitrends does support AIX. It's one of the 220-something operating systems and hypervisors that we do support with our solutions. So yes, if you have AIX solutions, or boxes, we can support those as well. Let's see. Someone asked if they can download the presentation. I think that was said earlier on. We are going this presentation is actually going to be made available for replay, so I think that's going to be available as well. Question came in: is there a best practice white paper that would help me decide whether to use agent-based backups or other native backups? We do have a number of things that are on our white paper, that are on our website, that talk about our deep virtualization protection. So if you actually go to the Unitrends website and you do a search for deep virtualization, you will see us go through and talk about the trade-offs between using an agent or not using an agent. We talk about it in great detail in both some white papers as well as some of our other web content. So someone said, if I'm using Unitrends agents on my guest, do I need to be concerned? No, our agents do not rely on CBT at all. So there's no concern there. And truthfully, with the recent patches with VMware, this should be not a concern for people going forward as well. But if you're using Unitrends agents on your guest right now, there's no issue to be concerned there as well. Does Unitrends recovery assurance work with backup products from any other vendor? Currently the Reliable DR product does not require Unitrends backup. It's something that will work in any VMware or Hyper-V environment. There are some advantages, we believe, to kind of running it in a Unitrends environment. And we kind of think 2 + 2 = 5 in this particular case from a user experience standpoint. But it is possible if you have other environments and you simply want the recovery assurance capability, you can purchase that as well. Give me a second as I'm going through some of these. Someone said, do you have backup to tape media options? Yes, Unitrends does support backup to tape. Our recovery series physical appliances support tape backup natively. If you want tape backup with our software product, there are challenges of doing tape backup from a virtual appliance. So we do have an option where you can actually install UEB as a installable software into a bare metal Linux environment, and that gives you the ability to actually have full tape capabilities, just like you would from the physical appliance as well. There's a question here from Jim. It says, currently using Recovery 824 with ESXi 6. How do I know if I'm safe taking incrementals? You should be safe taking incrementals, provided that you've done the patches from VMware that I called out specifically in the presentation here. But this is one of the reasons why, if you're concerned about it, we really do recommend you have a conversation and look at the recovery assurance capabilities. That way you can have complete confidence you can in your backup. But if you do have concerns with it, I would reach out to both VMware and kind of issue a support ticket into them, or reach out to Unitrends as well, and we can help you as well. Looking at some of the questions here. There's a question here about, does Unitrends deduplicate? Yes, we do. Unitrends actually has two different options as part of what we call our adaptive deduplication technology. So we have a very advanced kind of content-aware deduplication technology, and we have the ability to both do inline deduplication, which has been added into our product in the past year, or we do on-target kind of deduplication as well. Most customers are going with inline deduplication. Our adaptive deduplication engine is very efficient. There's several white papers on our website. One talks about our dedupe engine versus others. It's called "Don't Get Deduped by dedupe vendors," and there's another one that actually talks specifically about the adaptive deduplication technologies. So I would recommend taking a look at those white papers if you're interested in the Unitrends deduplication efforts. Probably only have a few more minutes here for questions. Trying to just look through, see if there's any common ones that are in here. Someone asked, what's the granular backup restore for SQL Server? So we do have the ability to do a very granular backup on SQL Server. We do use agents in that particular case, and we can go in and back up and do recovery of specific objects within the database, as well as kind of a broader technique. There's probably a whole another webinar that we could probably do on application level granular recovery. But we do have granular recovery for most of your major enterprise applications for SQL, Exchange, Oracle, et cetera. So I'm going to look and try and take one more question here as we go through. Let's see. So the question basically says, how can recovery assurance product validate that the sandbox environment matches that of the production environment? Well, the way this actually works, and this is if we're essentially using your backup data. So as your you're backing up your data on a regular basis, we will be as in sync as your backup. So if your backup window is 15 minutes, we'll have the latest data. So if your production environment, so as often as we're replicating data into your secondary environment, that is as close as we're gonna get. So in theory and in practice, your sandbox environment data should be very, very close to your production environment. And this is where automating these capabilities really helps, because you can not only run these tests, once a month, you can run these tests every couple hours if that's what it's needed to validate your environment, to prove that you're always able to recover. So that's what we've seen for really critical applications. Is we've seen customers that are running these recovery assurance tests as often as every couple hours. That way, worst case that they ever have is they know that they can just back up to that latest certified recovery point, and that's a recoverable solution. So I think with that, I think we're nearing the end of the time that we had allocated here. So I think I'm going to turn this back over to Chelsea to wrap up.
Sure. Well, yes, I would like to thank David for taking the time to speak to us today, and I would like to thank all of you once again for joining us. Please know that you will receive a follow-up email directing you to the materials from today's webcast, and please make sure to complete the short online evaluation that will be popping up when you leave. Please let us know how today's session went. Thank you all again for attending, and have a wonderful rest of your day.